Find your end user early. I think what we were endeavoring to do was such a monumental task, quantifying nature. We spent a lot of time doing that before we knew the use cases.
That's Jared Hanley of NatureQuant.
Yeah, I'm Jared Hanley. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders for NatureQuant. We don't really have a pitch per se, but I will say that what we are doing is quantifying nature in the broadest sense. And we use those metrics that we create to examine how nature influences many aspects of our lives, primarily human health. But we look at all kinds of things: urban heat islands, real estate values, etc.
What was the initial inspiration for starting this business?
Well, I'm a data scientist at heart, and I also love nature. And I felt that nature was just woefully underappreciated because it wasn't being quantified. And so the lack of really a number, if you will, kept it out of a lot of analysis, economic analysis, health analysis, etc. And nature's messy. I mean, it's hard to quantify. And so that's what we've been trying to do over the last 4 or 5 years.
Case study wise, can you give an example of how somebody might benefit or use the information that you're aggregating?
I'll give two because we have a few different product suites. The first one is called NatureScore, which is really a location intelligence tool. It's like a mapping product, if you will, kind of like a Google Earth for nature. So say you're a public health official and you want to understand how, the build of your environment or your city is influencing the health of that population. You can give us a location like the house you're sitting in right now. We examine a radius around your house and we look at the mix of built and natural elements and now can state with pretty high confidence how those things are contributing to your health. And so, you roll that out at scale and you can see billions of dollars of value that certain health beneficial nature elements are providing to a society. So that's NatureScore. That's just one use of that. The second is a mobile app called NatureDose. And what NatureDose is, as I mentioned, it's a mobile app that tracks your personal exposure to various environments, primarily inside and outside. But also once you go outside, we look at the quality of your environment. So are you in a Walmart parking lot or in a biodiverse forest? And we use that kind of exposure data and pair it to all kinds of biomarkers. And we're now understanding how you can improve your health, your sleep, basically by getting outside into these biodiverse environments more often. And so it's kind of like a step tracker, but for time outside in nature. And it's also paired to optimal health.
Changing gears a little bit, I am a huge fan of other founders providing advice for folks who may have just started the journey or maybe considering getting involved in a startup. Given your experience, what's one piece of advice you would give to those folks?
I often say, don't listen to other people's advice, do your own thing. And so I also don't want to give people advice right now. But I will say, find your end user early. I think what we were endeavoring to do was such a, monumental task, quantifying nature. We spent a lot of time doing that before we knew the use cases, specifically in the end users. And so, we lost a little time kind of playing in various markets that ended up being a dead end. So I think find the use cases and potentially work backwards into the product.
What in your world, where, especially because it's this really interesting mix of, kind of traditional data analysis technology, but then also the natural world, what's one resource that you rely on as a founder, as a human, as a person in nature? What's one thing you find yourself going back to time and time again that might benefit other folks?
Well, from a business perspective, there is actually a wealth of location intelligence that you can buy, or much of it's free. And it's almost an overwhelming amount of data that I think we as a society need to start leveraging more. If these big data approaches are becoming more common, but there's still, I think, a lot of opportunity for people to access all that location intelligence and then bring valuable tools to society from it. So that's from the business, I would say. It's a very rich sea out there of information that just people haven't, kind of turned into actionable intelligence. Personally, I mean, it's very simple. Get outside more often. I mean, we've now tracked tens of thousands of people, and we know that Americans are not getting outside. Less than 2 to 3% of their lives are outdoors in nature, and we do see that this new indoor lifestyle is detrimental to our health. So we have to counterbalance that a bit, and that's what we're trying to do.
I think culturally, the Pacific Northwest tends to be a little more outside, or at least people who are motivated to be outside, I hope. But I definitely see the absolute value of what you're doing, even for folks who live in a area like we do, or a region like we do, because, I'm often guilty of saying, well, the coast is just 90 minutes away if I feel like going there, or the mountains 90 minutes, but I don't actually make the effort. So having data to drive some of that behavior could be hugely valuable.
Yeah, and you're not alone. I mean, we've now got a representative sample of Americans in every region, every demographic you might imagine. And it's, pretty universal that people aren't getting out that often. There is, small pockets of people that get out more. But in general, I would say society's more urban and more indoor than it's ever been. And it's continuing to trend that direction. So we just need to acknowledge that and figure out ways to manage it.
Yep. Totally agree. Because we touched on kind of the data question, I'm sure I would be remiss if I didn't ask the elephant in the room AI question. How does AI play into the future of what you're doing?
You simply can't do what we're doing without AI. So imagine the crazy web of your environment. So not just indoor, outdoor buildings, outdoor space, trees, water, it goes on forever. And then the myriad of impacts on your health. So, what your diet is, how active you are, your age, it's just an incredible web of data that we can't parse apart without machine learning tools. And that's what we do. We aggregate these massive sets of data, we set a target, and the AI process gives us algorithms that are incredibly predictive. So we now know that, that tree down the street is helping your asthma rate. Or, if you get 120 minutes outside per week, your sleep quality improves. It's just very difficult to do those kind of big data, analysis approaches without leveraging AI. It's possible, but it's going to be slow and it's going to be far inferior.
I started in tech startups in the mid 90s, and the common refrain has always been just aggregate enough data and eventually we'll figure out how to derive some value out of the data in aggregate form. And it seems this era of AI is the first time where we've actually been able to realize the promise of those massive amounts of data and actually do something meaningful with them.
Also, we do a lot of work with academics. There's always what we call confounding factors or covariates. You're trying to understand the impact of A on B, and you're missing the 80 other elements that are contributing to that relationship. And historically, you could only examine A and B because we're doing it manually. Now we can examine all 100 elements simultaneously and get a very powerful prediction model. And so it's a new day. So for us, being able to get a lot of location intelligence, being able to apply these machine learning tools, we can just get really smart about how do we build healthy environments and healthy behaviors.
You've been incredibly helpful. Appreciate you carving out the time. I have get outside at the top of my list, but secondarily, how can we be helpful in your pursuits right now?
One of the biggest challenges for us is just getting people's attention about this topic. We fight in the attention economy to get people outside, which doesn't really have a $1 billion marketing budget. For people who haven't been outside a lot, it's kind of scary and uncomfortable. And so I think just raising awareness around the fact that, biodiversity is an important aspect to human health. And we feel like we're the leaders in that space, but without a lot of people, sending that message, I don't think it gets heard.
Do you have a startup story to tell? I would love to hear from you.